If you want some FIFA 23 coins, please check out MMOXP.com. Their link is down in the description. They're fast, cheap and reliable, and if you use code Rema you can get yourself a 5% discount. Defending in FIFA 23 is something that quite a few people struggle with, so in this video I'm going to be highlighting 10 mistakes that you might be making when it comes to your defensive play. Now, just before we get started guys, I hate to ask this, but I would very much appreciate it if you guys could subscribe to the channel if you aren't already, because I've noticed around 90% of you that watch my content are not subscribed. So don't feel like you have to subscribe, but if you are enjoying the content, I would very much appreciate it if you could subscribe. And with all that aside guys, let's get right into the video. Now, number one guys is something that might surprise you a little bit, and it is over tracking runs for over the top through balls. Now of course it's good to stop over the top through balls and track them, but you can see I did that far too early, and it actually gives his striker more space as a result because he actually plays them all onside. You can see he would actually be offside if I just held my run there. And another thing is, when you track the run too early, what a good player will do is they will alter the pass that they make. So you can see he was probably thinking about playing that striker in behind, but because he sees that my player's all the way back there, he passes it in the middle and can work around that. So just remember guys, it's good to track runs, but don't track them far too early because you can get punished for it. Now number two is being too aggressive with your defenders at the wrong time. So what do I mean by this? Well, what I mean is sometimes there is a lot of space between the defenders and the player with the ball, and what some people do is they'll just charge right out of their defensive line with their player. The attacker can see it coming from a mile off, and then it leaves a massive gap in which they can just play a ball right through your defense. Now when you're already quite close to the attacker with the defender, it's not a bad idea to be aggressive. This is why I use a high depth, because it keeps my defensive line quite high, so I'm always very compact to the players with the ball, so you know, you don't give the attacker much time when you do decide to be aggressive. But yeah, if there is a big gap between the player with the ball and the player you're controlling to defend with, it is not a very good idea to charge after them because you give them far too much time to react and make a decision. Now number three guys is using jockey when running back to chase a player with the ball. So what I mean by this is when you're using like your CDM to run after a player that is running at your defensive line, you know, so you're chasing them from behind, it's best not to use the jockey button because this actually slows the player down. For example, if you're using a lengthy player like Kessie, if you're holding the jockey button while sprinting back, you're actually capping the player's top speed. They're not running as fast as they can, and they're not able to catch the player as quickly. But if you don't use the jockey button while you're chasing them back, you will catch them a lot faster, and then obviously when you're in their vicinity, you can use the jockey button to help tackle them. Now another mistake I see people making is using the sprint jockey button when you are defending in your own penalty area, and this is a bad idea because although sprint jockeying is good pretty much everywhere else on the pitch because it is faster, when you're around your own penalty box you want it to actually be a little bit slower. Now the reason for this is because it allows you to have more control. When your opponents are in the penalty box, they are usually making smaller movements. They're not really sprinting because there is not that much space. So by using the sprint jockey button, you're making your players overcommit and you're losing control of them, in which your opponent can just quickly weave in and out throughout you. But if you don't use the sprint jockey button, you have a lot greater control and you can make these more fine movements to intercept the play, and it makes it 10 times easier, I promise. Now number five is a bit of a weird one because it's not always down to a user mistake, but the mistake I'm talking about is not using second man press to defend cutbacks into the box. Now the reason this is a big mistake is due to the passing mechanics in FIFA 23. Essentially, if you're controlling a defensive player, when your opponent makes that pass, let's say you've blocked it off, what it will do is it will correct that path to avoid the interceptor and alter the receiver's pass, so essentially you don't intercept it. Now this usually doesn't affect defensive AI players, so what I like to do, because it seems to be very effective, is to use a player that is already in the box to cut off a passing option in there, and use second man press while I'm doing that to cut off the opponent that is trying to pass it. So it will close them down and then you're already covering one of the passes in the middle. This seems to be more effective because the defensive AI player will seem to mirror the movements a lot better, and they seem to have more reactive interceptions, which helps, you know, stop the cutbacks. And then even if they do get the ball through, you're kind of cutting off one of the passes anyway, so it basically doubles up on blocking. Now number 6 is a very generic but also a very important one, and it is making sure you have a good camera. Now at the start of the year I like to use a telebroadcast camera because I thought, you know, it wasn't too zoomed in and it also wasn't too zoomed out. But what I noticed as I went on was I couldn't really see enough of what I wanted to see in order to keep my opponent on lock. So what I did was I moved to the co-op camera, because essentially the co-op camera allows me to see a lot more and close my opponents down quicker, because I can see more of my defensive players and I can see their positions. It also helped me track over the top through balls a lot more, because again I have a better view, which I didn't have with the telebroadcast camera. So although it's a very generic tip, using a camera like co-op does make defending 10 times easier, because, you know, if you've got better vision, your defense will be better. That's just how it works, right? Now number 7, guys, is using the circle or the standing tackle button when you're not sure if you're going to win the ball or not. The only time you should actually use this button is when you know you have a very good chance of winning the ball, because when you use the circle button, if you miss it, your player does a very long animation which completely writes them out of the play, and your opponent is able to exploit a big gap. So what I suggest doing is using the jockey button to just basically run into people most of the time, because it seems to be better than standing tackles. But obviously if you are in the correct position and you are able to retrieve the ball with circle, then it's a good idea to use it. But otherwise, make sure you're not using it when you're not certain you're going to get the ball, because again it can really harm your defensive work. Now number 8, guys, is the overuse of the second man press mechanic in FIFA 23. Now although it is very good to press, although it's very good to use second man press, if you overuse this command, it will pull your players out of position and your opponent will find it very easy to break you down. Now it's difficult to give you an exact scenario on where to use second man press, but the idea is that it's good to use it when your opponent already has limited options. So I like to use second man press where I'll control a player to maybe like cut off a passing lane, so then they don't have a passing option, and then I'll use the second man press to close that player down that has the ball. So not only am I just cutting off the passing lane, I'm also putting pressure on the player with the ball and then able to retrieve it that way as well. Now number 9, guys, is having too much of a passive approach to your defensive gameplay. Now I see a lot of people that just like to control their CDMs, cut off some passes and drop back with their defenders, and this is not always the best way to defend at all, because what a good player can do is they can take their time on the ball, use something like creative runs, and really just cut you apart over time. So what you don't want to fall into is being too defensive and too passive when it comes to your defending. So, you know, making sure you are pressing at the right times, making sure you are aggressive with your defenders at the right times is very important, because if you're constantly just sitting back controlling your CDM, eventually a good player will just break you down, whether it be with player lock or creative runs. So don't fall into the trap of being too passive. Now number 10, guys, is actually players being afraid to use the hard slide tackle. Now the thing with the hard slide tackle is it should only be used as like a last ditch thing, or when you know you have a very good chance of winning the ball from it. Now the reason I like using it is because a lot of the time people do not expect it. So when your opponent is running in the box, they're not expecting you to slide at them and win the ball back. Now ask yourself this: if you use the hard slide tackle, what are the pros and cons? Well, the pros are that you can win the ball back and stop a certain goal, and the cons are that you can concede a goal by giving away a penalty. You know, so you know there's actually more pros to using the hard slide tackle than not in those situations. So don't be afraid to use it, guys, because it can actually save you a lot of the time. So yeah, make sure you are using that when you can. But anyways, guys, that is everything for the video. I hope you have enjoyed it. I've tried very hard to create this, so I hope you guys can understand that and show me some love if you did enjoy it or find it useful. But yeah, that is everything, guys. I hope you enjoyed. Please leave a like if you did. Subscribe to the channel if you are new, so you never miss out on any videos like this one, and don't forget to turn on notifications so you are notified when a video is posted. And with all that aside, guys, I hope you have a fantastic rest of your day, and I shall catch you all later. Peace.